writing system being developed in India because of texting that is much more syllabic than traditional. So, OMG. So Mayan writing in 2,000 years ago, people wrote on stairways, on walls, on ceilings, on floors, on pottery, on their shirts. Writing was a very, very, wide arena of activity. We tend to think, as Maria pointed out, of literacy in terms of books, things like that, or maybe computers. But there's also graffiti as literacy. If you know anything about tagging, it's another form of literacy that's very, very common, but kind of countercultural. The Maya system ended at conquest in 1500, but it was a kind of a combination phonetic system, like an alphabet system, and a syllabic system. So it had about 400 symbols. It didn't have the 4,000 that Chinese has, and it didn't have the 30 or so that alphabetic writing systems tend to have. Writing was limited to the elite, but it was an oral thing. People didn't read to themselves, they read out loud. You always pronounced things. Whereas think about our writing system is, for the most part, it's a quiet thing that you do inside of your head, not a public thing. So there's an example of some Mayan writing, the Dresden Codex. It looks like a comic book. They would have pictures of political leaders, or maybe they were gods, who knows what. They would have numbers over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They would have symbols for different things. And the writing was written A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, is the way people would write it. So that system disappeared. At conquest, a few books were translated into, or transcribed into Spanish, like the Popol Vuh or the Chilambalam. And those survived. During the caste war that I studied, there were still some sacred books that people kept in little villages, and they would read them publicly once a year. And if you tried to be too interested in them, you were killed. There was a German anthropologist when I was doing research who was killed for showing too much interest in literacy. It took me a year and a half, and I finally got to photograph some of these books. So even the notion of how close writing is to your identity is an important thing to think about. Some things are just not for other people to read. So today, in Guatemala, for example, that's my telephone, I'll just ignore it. Literacy is very, very low. In the rural areas, probably less than 50%. For the whole country, it's around 70-some%. In Yucatan, where I work, it's very, very high, above 90%. What accounts for the differences in this part of Central America? Poverty. You could raise the literacy rate 10 to 15 points in Guatemala if every child had $30 more a year. That's what it would take for them to get to school and back. The main reason people aren't literate isn't because they don't have the brains, or they don't have the desire, or they don't have teachers. They can't get to the damn schools. So when we think about literacy, it's not just this psychological thing or your desire, it's poverty. So reducing poverty is one of the most important things to do if you're interested in literacy. Secondly, access. Nobody wants to live in a malaria-infested, tuberculosis-infested, dangerous, narco-infested community. So when someone wants to be a teacher and they want to train indigenous people, they rarely will even stay in the town to do their work because they get killed. And so violence and danger is another real barrier to literacy, especially in all parts of the third world, certainly in the areas that I live. The areas that I work, because they're isolated, there isn't good health care. The tuberculosis rate in southern Guatemala, where I work, is in indigenous communities is up around 60% of the population. The reported rate is much, much lower. It's about 13 or 14%. because nobody actually goes out there and does any epidemiology. So what teacher coming from the capital city would like to go teach kids how to read when they're faced with getting tuberculosis, or getting malaria, or getting killed by narcos through the area? And political will. People have to want to do this. There has to be some payoff. So in literacy, in the history of literacy programs, like how do you do it? What do you do? There's a very famous Brazilian Jesuit priest, Paulo Freire, who died in 1992. But he had a revolutionary idea about literacy, which I think still makes a lot of sense today. Some of the community literacy programs that are around today are really based on his idea. He had the idea that literacy is one of the reasons why there's so much oppression. If you don't know you have rights to land, if you don't know you have rights to a highway, if you can't read a contract about something, then you're going to be oppressed. So Freire said you have to tie literacy to breaking the shackles of oppression. Secondly, he said literacy has to be part of social action. It can't just be for fun or to learn how to read because it's good for you. You got to do something with it. You got to form a social group, a reading group, and that reading group has to change something in a community. Third, he said that literacy was easiest to accomplish around the world if you use a syllabic system rather than an alphabetic system. Syllabic systems are just much more, how can I put it, common in your brain. So you might have syllables like na, ne, ni, no, nu, right? You might have another one, la, le, li, lo, lu. You might teach people those, you can teach them in songs. And then maybe you're in a community with sheep and people are trying to, rob your sheep or not pay you enough for your sheep. And so you say, no, la, na, 3 syllables, no more wool. Right? And so Freire said that the thing about literacy is to bring people kind of the tools for confronting exploitation and oppression. There's a program here, and we have a representative right over here, Kathy, who's with us, a community in southern Guatemala that I've been working with for the last number of years. They have a program of appropriate rural education and literacy that has become a model actually around the world. It's in the part of Guatemala that's near Honduras and near the Caribbean. And it's a mosquito-infested, malaria-driven, full of narcos who walk into restaurants with machine guns on their hips and dark glasses, so it's a pretty tough place to do work. And yet the indigenous people there have developed a program of literacy that is based on computer literacy first and other literacy second. And so the people in this area have computer systems. They come to school in big boats. 500 Mayan children come there. They meet anthropologists' wives. They have a floating dental clinic that goes around and pulls teeth. They have a maternal and infant clinic as well. And the children are talking about things that are real to them, like their family, which is probably a larger family than you have, or where they live, and the fish and the environment in that area. So I'm going to leave you with that thought that we can discuss a little bit later, that literacy, A, is communal. It has to be done by a bunch of people. It can't be done by an individual. And 2, literacy to work has to change the world. It has to change your situation, your community situation. It has to make you better. Learning to read and write just because it's fun or good for you is seldom going to be effective.